We think, well, wow, this is groundbreaking because this is not how it's usually done in the legal sphere. But a lot of the time, these family law clients are first-time legal users, and they're just normal mum and dad clients or general consumers like we all are, and they just sort of like, yeah, great. They almost wouldn't expect it any other way, and you feel like they're going to be saying this and that, but they're like, yep, great, can't wait, show me the options and I'll pick one. And if you put yourselves in the shoes of the consumer, that's exactly how I myself would expect to engage with a professional. I want to know upfront the work that you're doing. I want to know the price for that work, and if you can give me some different options, even better. I wouldn't be signing up on any other basis. I certainly would not be engaging anybody on an hourly rate.
Welcome to Legal Off The Leash, the podcast where we take the legal profession out of the box and into a happier and more fulfilling future.
We're your hosts, Scott Simmons and Elizabeth de Stadler. On today's episode, we're talking to Elani Maas, value pricing whisperer and law firm transformer. Eleni helps law firms break up with the billable hour, with a sharp eye for strategy and a soft spot for lawyers who want to do things differently. Eleni guides firms through the shift to value pricing, cutting through the confusion and turning a daunting change into a bold, future-focused transformation. Eleni draws on her background as a legal practice manager and her credentials in legal operations and legal practice management to turn big ideas into everyday practice. Eleni has made it her mission to help lawyers rethink how they work, how they price, and how they connect with their clients. All of which create better outcomes for clients, better lives for lawyers, and the slow but sure death of the billable hour, one law firm at a time. Eleni, welcome to Legal Off The Leash.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to be here with you both.
You and I have known each other for a while, but before we get into the big bits around value pricing and the history of the billable hour and the damage we all know that it's done, why don't you give us a bit of background about you, how you got to where you are, how value pricing came into your life, and we'll go from there.
Sounds great. So I'm joining you from Yelling Up, which is a small town a few hours south of Perth in Western Australia, which is where I grew up. I moved up to the Big Smoke to go to university to study environmental science, actually. Obviously a completely different industry. And during the time when I was at uni, I started working in a law firm part-time just to get some cash for the weekend and get through my studies. And while I was there, I really just kind of found my place. I really enjoyed actually working in a law firm. My role developed over the years and started off in an administrative role and moved into the accounts area. And I was the accounts manager at that law firm for a few years. And during that time, I was finishing my study, and I ended up completing my degree. It took me a long time, but I did finally successfully finish that degree. But I never moved into environmental science and pursued that because I actually found my career in law. And a big part of that actually came about from value pricing, because obviously it wasn't a passion of mine under the time-based model of my accounts management role of chasing up debtors and trying to squeeze money out of people who couldn't, they'd signed up, we'd done the work, they had this enormous bill and the value of all the work being done, and I was the person chasing them around. They weren't answering my phone calls, nobody wanted to speak to me, and it wasn't a very pleasant experience for myself or the clients that I was chasing. But the value pricing model actually allowed that to all be flipped on its head. So my first introduction to value pricing came about through a good friend of mine and yours, Scott, John Chisholm, and he helped the law firm that I was working with at the time, Linden Brown Lawyers. He helped us to transition that law firm to a value pricing model. And so my role then significantly changed into being basically the person that was managing that transition, and everything that was under the value pricing bucket came under my umbrella. So we changed the way that we did everything. We started designing scopes of work, working out how we're going to work for our clients and build different service options and agree on upfront fixed prices. And the relationship that I then had with the clients flipped into an upfront onboarding and client engagement role rather than the chasing people at the end for the money with the stick roles. That gave me so much fulfillment, and the shift in my role was such that it's something that I enjoyed doing, that it's now become a career that I have pursued, which is what really kept me in the legal industry in the first place.
I have a question, and I'm a relative newcomer to value-based pricing. Scott introduced me to it. Why did the firm want to change from the billable model to value-based pricing?
Well, I think that the billable model, and you're probably not unfamiliar with the issues that the billable model does cause, and I think that that's felt at every level of the organisation, and it was something which Steve and Jackie, who are the directors of that firm, do talk about quite frequently, around what the drivers were. And value pricing was something that they had heard about and were aware of for a few years before actually grabbing it by the horns and deciding to make the change for their legal business. And a big part of that, again, was John Chisholm and the group that he was a part of, which is Verisage. They went to a few different conferences and were listening to thought leaders around business models and what the different benefits were. And so, without speaking for them, but my understanding was a range of different things, but one was around that client relationship. So lawyers come into law with the want to help people and be on the same page, and they're advocating for their clients and they're aligning themselves completely with their clients, and that is so true in every aspect of how they work, except for, of course, the practice of law, where there's this disconnect between clients not wanting to pick up the phone to call their lawyer because they're worried about the clock and all of those sorts of things. Also culturally, there's issues which stem from that cultural perspective of people having to be accountable for every 6 minutes of their time and being driven by different billable hours, the siloing effect. And really also, we would hope in this day and age, the value pricing model is not a point of difference for law firms. I would hope that it was so common that everybody was doing it, but in fact, it is a point of difference, and it is a way that Lynn & Brown as a business has differentiated themselves and many others. There's many firms doing it. Of course, they're all pretty spread out, and in their markets, the people that are doing it, that's a real point of differentiation that they can offer to their clients, which is that we work with you on an upfront basis, and you're never going to get a bill from us that you don't expect. We're never going to do work without you pre-authorizing it. You're going to have complete certainty and control over what we're doing and how we're doing it. So I think that they were really some of the main reasons for that firm in particular.
So I've been really vocal about the fact that if you trace back every problem in the legal profession, if you go far enough back and you do that 5 whys, or when you come back to it, it all stems back, for me anyway, to the billable hour. You mentioned things like silos and poor working practices, and in the book Time's Up by Paul Dunn and Ron Baker, Paul talks about the fact that no lawyer got into law to account for every 6-minute unit. You mentioned that as well. No lawyer gets into the legal profession thinking, do you know what I'm going to get really, really good at? It's not helping clients. My number one job is to account for every single 6-minute unit that I work. For me, that's the core problem that leads to everything else. What are your thoughts on that? For you, do you see it as the core problems, or am I being a bit too simplistic about it?
Yeah, I absolutely see it as the core problem. And I think that beyond the lawyers not just going into it for the fact of being really good at recording their time, it's also what the clients aren't coming to the firm for. Clients are not coming to lawyers to buy their attention in 6-minute increments. They're coming to lawyers for outcomes and solution and support, hand-holding, having someone to bounce things off, a problem that they can share, the trusted advisor. It's really interesting because we do a lot of sessions with different law firms to help to change their mindset and introduce people to what value pricing is. And part of those sessions will always ask people, so why do clients come to you? What is it that you're selling? And of course, we talk about intangible benefits and tangible benefits, the commercial outcomes that they might receive, but then there's also the intangible things like the support, helping me to sleep at night, all of those sorts of things. People would never say they come to me for my time. Nobody just wants to sit with you to be in your presence just for the sake of it. 6 minutes, whether you're doing anything or not. I mean, I know lawyers are great, but they're not that great. So I think that it's beyond that. It's not actually what the clients are coming to the firm for. And I do agree with you, Scott. I do think that it is the cause of so many issues in the legal industry. And I'm really pleased to see in the last few years how vocal, and you're a big part of that, Scott, and there's many others that are also very vocal about it. And I do feel like times are changing, which is really pleasing to see.
So why do you think lawyers are so resistant to this change? I mean, Scott will know as well that sometimes those posts really, like, people are commenting in quite an aggressive way about why the billable hour is still necessary.
Well, I think that lawyers are skeptical by nature, very risk adverse, and often change resistant. And they are qualities in lawyers that we rely on for those lawyers to do a good job. When you go to see a lawyer as a client, you want them to be skeptical, you want them to be risk adverse, you want them to consider the whole picture. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but when you've got a large group of people with those similar tendencies, it can make change initiatives really, really slow to be taken up. I read an article recently, and there was 2 people that had been interviewed about the billable hour in the rise of AI, and one of them said the billable hour is the way to go because it's how I've always done it. And the other person said, well, this couldn't possibly happen in my practice area because it's too hard to know what's going to happen next. And to me, they just don't really quite cut the mustard to stick with the billable hour. But these are very experienced people who are very fantastic at what they do. But the mindset about using a different business model to do what you're doing now, but in a different and better way, just doesn't seem to come naturally. But to a lot of people, it does. And I must say, like, the younger generations, and I mean, this is something that John says all the time, is that it's the unlearning that's harder than the learning. It is the ingrained habits. The other thing is that lawyers are typically very busy and under an enormous amount of pressure to be delivering the results that they are being paid to do. And so often there's not room, there's no space created for this change to be made. Or if people go, okay, great, we want to explore value pricing, you're in the pilot program, let's go. There's not often an allowance for that against their billable targets or the other responsibilities that they have. And it's just this humongous change process, which is just layered on top because we're trying to keep up with the pressures of an existing full file load and the other pressures of running a legal business. I think that there's a few different factors there.
There's so many things I want to pick up on from what you said over the last few minutes. But I think the one thing that I want to start with is, and I don't know whether you noticed this, Elizabeth, but Eleni said, lawyers might be nice to be around, but we're not that nice. They're not that much fun to be around. I don't know if you picked up on that, but I was a little bit hurt by it.
It doesn't really disturb me all that much. I mean, obviously, because I make a living out of that. And I don't think they're not nice on purpose. I think Eleni said something about how we are wired is to be combative because we focus at first, at least, on litigation. And people tend to allow that to wash over into all areas of law.
Yeah. So you talked about the change in your relationships with clients, going from this thing where clients are hesitant to call their lawyers, they're hesitant to spend time with them because it's all on the clock. 2 things I want to get from you is firstly, how quickly did you notice a change in that when you moved to value pricing? And the other thing is, one of the things that when I talk about value pricing, you get this comeback of, yeah, but clients will just take advantage of it. They'll call you 1 million times a day. They'll always be on the phone to you. All of a sudden, those phone calls that might have lasted 5 minutes will now last 50 minutes because they know that they're no longer on the clock and being charged for it. So I suppose the two-part question is that firstly, did you notice that change in your client relationships? What's the kind of truth behind when lawyers have that comeback and say, yeah, but they'll take so much advantage of this fixed cost that you've given them?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of different layers to this, I guess. So the first is, and I didn't really explain this well in the intro, but I'm the practice manager of a small family law firm called Bromfield Family Law. And I work alongside Catherine Bromfield and Zoe Rosman, who are the family lawyers there, and we practice exclusively and we only offer our services on a value pricing basis to our clients. That's how we are interacting with all of our clients all of the time. And so when a new client comes along, myself or my colleague Zara will speak to them and talk them through, explain how we work. It's a fixed price for the initial meeting or that strategy meeting with their lawyer, and then we will prepare a customized strategy for them with 3 different options that they can choose from and fixed prices for those different options. And we think, wow, this is groundbreaking because this is not how it's usually done in the legal sphere. But a lot of the time, these family law clients are first-time legal users, and they're just normal mum and dad clients or general consumers like we all are, and they just sort of like, yeah, great. They almost wouldn't expect it any other way, and you feel like they're going to be saying this and that, but they're like, yep, great, can't wait, show me the options and I'll pick one. And if you put yourselves in the shoes of the consumer, that's exactly how I myself would expect to engage with a professional. I want to know upfront the work that you're doing. I want to know the price for that work, and if you can give me some different options, even better. I wouldn't be signing up on any other basis. I certainly would not be engaging anybody on an hourly rate. So in terms of that, I mean, that's just how our clients expect it. Some of them have been with a lawyer, and then they're switching from an existing lawyer, and that for whatever reason not happy, and they're trying to find a new fit, and so then they would have experienced the hourly rate and coming over to the fixed price model, and it's always just positive feedback from them. We've never been asked, oh, well, my other lawyer used to do time, I really want to see your timesheets, can you please show me what you've been doing? We've never ever once been asked that. So it is quite interesting to see it from that perspective. And there was a first question there, but I started waffling on, so I forgot the first part of that question. Sorry, Scott. What was?
That's okay. No, it's my fault. Shouldn't have done it in 2 parts. Should have let you
He
focus on the first.
waffles in
Let
his
me off the
questions as
leash.
well.
I waffle in yeah, you're so right. I do. So the client relationships part was how that has changed. And sorry, just before I go on to the second part, when you're giving presentations, they say to you, if you kind of really drop a bomb on the audience, let it sink in for a moment. And I think without realizing it, the bomb that you dropped there was most clients who don't do this all the time wouldn't expect it any other way, would expect to go into somewhere, and just like they do with anything else, they would expect to know what the price is that they're paying for. We think that if we offer value pricing, it's somehow revolutionary. But all we're doing is we're meeting society's expectations for how they should buy anything. I think we're so stuck in this tiny little way of thinking that thinks, oh, value pricing, it's unexplainable. We can't possibly understand it. No, but clients do. And for those few, and it does tend to be in-house lawyers, when you hear law firms saying, yeah, but my clients will want to be charged by the hour. When you ask the question, oh, it's in-house lawyers, tends to be in-house lawyers that say, yeah, we want to be charged by the hour. So, but the second question is that one of the things that we get pushed back on is, oh, but clients will take advantage. You know, if they know they've got a fixed price, they will take advantage. What do you say to that?
Well, that has certainly not been our experience, and that hasn't been. So I've been with Bromfield Family Law coming up for 4 years now, and previous to that was with Lynn & Brown under the value pricing model for 3 years then, 3 or 4 years there. So it's been almost 8 years basically since I've been working in law firms operating solely under value pricing basis, and that's just never ever been my experience. The other beauty of it is that you do scope a legal matter in stages. We're not just giving a go to woe, we're not just giving one price from here until the end of our relationship together. What we're doing is working out the work that needs to be done, what your priorities are, what your objectives are, the strategy that will apply, what it is that you value, what your needs are, what your budget, etc., and giving you different options for how we're going to get from A to B. And then at B, we'll give you from B to C and so on. Sometimes it can be difficult for a lawyer to understand what that client might be like to work with, how needy they are, how dependent they might be, how much hand-holding they will need, etc. But we're only going to get caught out on those things in the first proposal. There will always be a second and a third. So you're only locked into that price for that one stage of work with that one particular client. These aren't menu prices that are slapped on every job. Once you set it, it doesn't just automatically apply to the rest of the firm. It is one discrete piece of work that you'll then learn from and do differently. And I want to give you an example of how we've dealt with that in our firm, because we did have a client who was very needy, very, very high on the dependency scale. She was in a pretty full-on parenting matter and needed like a lot of help. She wanted to be able to have that on-demand access to her lawyer, or if not on demand, then at least as she was thinking of things, firing them off in emails. And of course, as a lawyer, when that's happening to you, you're trying to deal with them and respond, and it's all coming in and you're trying to meet those clients' expectations. But sometimes we don't stop to actually ask the client what their expectations are. And so this model really helps to do that. So during the first stage, we worked out that she was, extremely high touch client. And so in the second proposal, and this was basically the template for all of the proposals that we gave to her throughout the course of her matter, is that the legal work in each three options would remain exactly the same. And the only difference was in the service level offering. And it was the way that we had set that out for her is that you can email your lawyer as much as you like, but in the lower base option, all of those, you have a fortnightly phone call with your lawyer and the lawyer was Zoe, you have a fortnightly call with Zoe where she will be able to deal with all of these queries and talk you through everything once a fortnight. So you can email as much as you like. It's always keeping an eye on it for urgency, but the client's not expecting a response. We'll talk about it all in our fortnightly meeting. In the middle option, that was a weekly meeting. And in the top option, it was an on-demand. You have a response within 2 business days to each and every email that you send through. And of course, the difference in price between the bottom option and the top option was $5,000 a month or something like that. But the client got to choose that service level offering. And she started off with the weekly, the middle one. And then after a certain point in the proceedings, she moved to the fortnightly one. And that worked really well for her. She knew exactly when she was going to be speaking with Zoe. She knew that her emails weren't going to be being responded to immediately, but the purpose for her was to get them out of her brain. It wasn't for that immediate response. And so it was a really good opportunity to actually, this is what value pricing or this model of scoping in stages does, is it gives you the opportunity to take stock of where you're at, where your client's at, what the expectations are, and then design your service offering to them based off that, rather than just turning on the clock and just plowing through because there is work to be done, which is the trap that the billable hour model lends itself to.
When I post about this, I always get berated. I would say 80% of people who really are resistant are litigation lawyers. And their principal objection is because litigation can't be predicted. What do you say to them?
Well, I think that it's a misconception about what value pricing actually is and how it works in a practical sense. We are a litigation practice. We do this in family law litigation. This is the model that we apply, and it works really well for us. And previously people used to say, oh, it can be done in commercial law, but it can't be done in family law. Well, we're doing it in family law. Or no, well, we can't do it in litigation. It's the type of model that can be applied to absolutely any professional service offering. It doesn't really matter exactly about the work that is involved. And the model is that we are pricing what we know, and we're pricing for different service levels or different strategy, etc. And we want to be really clear about what's included and what's excluded. And it's just about that communication piece with the client, and the client understands that if there's work that crops up in litigation which is not part of this ongoing scope, then we will give you another proposal that deals with that scope of work and our price to deal with that. So it's actually really quite straightforward, and litigation does help. Having the structure of the court process does really help, because the way that we tackle it is that after a court event, there's typically orders about what's going to happen up until the next court event or hearing, etc. And so it is actually really clear and distinct boundaries, the start to the finish of what that next stage looks like. And then we can build in different options or different things that we think might happen. The other party, of course, could file an injunction at any time. That clearly is not part of that original scope. We can then take the opportunity to reset and say, hey, right, this has come in, let's have a chat, this is how we propose to deal with it, here's your proposal. Sometimes you'll end up with two scopes of work like running side by side. Sometimes something will happen and whatever we're doing in that original scope of work kind of cuts off and another one takes over from there. So it's just really about understanding how the model works, and absolutely can be done. And like, I'm referring back to Lynn and Brown again, but they are also their litigation practice, and that's in, civil dispute resolution. There's many other law firms that are successfully operating value practice firms in litigation and otherwise. And so I'd say to the people that think it can't be done is to perhaps speak to a principal of a law firm who is doing it.
More of the things that come back at you is, well, value pricing just means that you're making up the price, and that's not being transparent, or that's not being fair to the client, because you're just making up. At least with the billable hour, you've got a set hourly rate. And so people know what they're going to be charged for every single hour that you're working for them. Again, I don't want this to be too leading, but that's ridiculous. But how do you answer that response to value pricing?
So I like to think of it that the hourly rate doesn't give you the same price every time. So even if you had two clients where the work appears to be the same on the face of it, preparing an application for consent orders, for example, if we're charging that by the hour, we've got two different clients side by side. By the end of their engagement, they're going to be charged two very different prices. And the difference is that the client hasn't had the opportunity to understand what the price is up front and engage on that basis. And of course, it's because each matter is unique. Each client has different qualities. They have different issues which need to be dealt with, considered, different levels of disclosure, different levels of negotiation. There's this legal work is made up of a project, and that's why applying a project management style approach is the appropriate way to deal with legal matters. And this is where creating an upfront scope of work and, having fixed prices fits really neatly into that project management style model. But to a certain degree, the prices are made up. They're not calculated on an hourly rate times hours equals X. A number of different factors are considered: the complexity of the work, how urgent it is, what the client's needs are, how organized they might be, how sophisticated they are, what the value to them actually is. These are all the questions that we're asking ourselves in determining value and creating the different options. And so there is an art to it. It is not a mathematical punch it into a spreadsheet, all of the different factors and out comes a number, although I'm sure you could do it like that, but that's not the approach that we take, and there is an art to it. Bearing in mind that one of the requirements of lawyers is to make sure that the costs that they are charging are fair and reasonable. So there is also that protective barrier. To a certain degree, I have to admit that they aren't calculated.
But it's an interesting one, isn't it, though, that fair and reasonable, if it's done up front and the client knows what they are paying for, if the client thinks it's fair and the client thinks it's reasonable, and they've made that decision up front and they know exactly what they're getting from you, and you hold up your end of the bargain, I've always thought that's the real definition of fair and reasonable, because everyone knows where they stand and everyone feels good about what they are getting. The other thing for me is that when we talk about making up the price from the lawyer's perspective, the approach that I always take with my clients is when you work out that scope, and you go through everything with the client and expectation mapping and everything else, when you go away and you work out the price, you look at that price and you say, if the scope stays the same, am I happy with this price? Am I happy to do this work at this price? And you will always give yourself, you'll work out a kind of baseline figure that you'll never go below, and then the way that the client is or certain aspects of the matter will make it go up higher or make it stay the same. But you'll always have in your mind a base figure that you'll never do this kind of piece of work for.
Yeah,
but that's in your mind anyway. That's
absolutely.
in your mind and in your heart. And it just extends from there. And then you look at everything and you go, okay, well, on the basis of this scope, I'm happy to do this piece of work for this amount. And at the end of it, if everything goes the way that it should do and the scope stays the same, I'll be happy at the end of it as well. And I look at it and I go, it's that simple. When it all comes down to it, you can science away as much as you want. But you said it, it's an art form, and value is a feeling, and it's value on the part of on the client, but it's also value on the part of the lawyer, which is, if I'm happy at the beginning of this and at the end of it, I'm still just as happy. That's the price it was meant to be.
Yeah, it goes to client selection as well, because you're taking that pause for the lawyer to have the autonomy to be able to actually think, is this work that I want to take on? Is this a client that I actually want to work with? Are they a good fit for me? Is this a good opportunity for me to learn something? Is this a good mentoring opportunity, a good referral source? Like, it's taking the pause to work out if the client is actually a good fit for the lawyer and for the firm more broadly. And I don't think that as an industry that law firms do typically have a very good or rigorous client selection process. Usually, as long as the client can afford to pay, then we'll do the work. And a lot of the time, the client can't actually afford to pay, and we don't find that out until afterwards. And we can see that, of course, on the debtors log at the end of each month. But in our 4 years at Bromfield Family Law, we've never ever had a formal cost complaint or even a complaint to us about the fees once the job is finished. We've never had a bad debtor. As soon as we invoice, we're paying that money from trust because the clients are paying up front. And I think that this is certainly true in Western Australia, and I know that it's true on the east side of Australia, and I can only expect that it's true in both of the areas where you are, is that 90% of the complaints that are made to the governing body, which is the Legal Profession Complaints Committee where we are, 90+% of them complaints made are actually about fees. And it's because the clients don't know how much it is until the end. And so when we talk about that alignment and knowing that it's fair and reasonable, if we're going to treat our clients as intelligent people that can make informed decisions, if you're putting forward a scope of work to them and a price for that work and they're agreeing to it, they're paying in accordance with the milestones, and you're doing a good job and delivering on what you've promised, then there really is no room for that dissatisfaction. And that's certainly what we see.
One of the important things for me is mental health of lawyers. And my question would be, do you think that the value-based pricing model is better for lawyers, and why?
I absolutely do. And I'm going to be surprised. Every answer that I have is I absolutely do about value pricing. But it is something that I see, and there's a number of different reasons for that. And one of them is just abolishing the 6-minute increment of feeling like you have to account for that time. We all go through periods of being more or less productive, or having difficult moments or days or weeks, or not being able to work at the level that perhaps we can when we are firing on all cylinders. And the billable hour model basically only really allows for us to be judging our colleagues or our own performance based on our productivity. It really is a unit of productivity. And what I think the value pricing model lends itself to, and what we certainly encourage firms that we work with to do, is to take a broader lens to the way that we actually measure, and not just measure, but celebrate contribution. Because when the timesheet falls away, it allows space for people to redesign what their firm actually looks like. What is it that we value as a firm? When that unit is there, it's too easy to default to and to look to as the most important measure of somebody's contribution to a law firm. Well, when that falls away, we get together and think, okay, well, what's important to us? What makes us want to come to work with our peers, to work with our clients? What gives us each fulfillment? And you can design however you want to design people to have their contribution towards that. And I think that that's something which is really powerful, because we do all work in different ways and have different strengths, and the expectations on lawyers is extremely high, and something that I think is really difficult is seeing those expectations be put on lawyers without then having any way to actually measure all of the other ancillary things that we're asking lawyers to do. It's like, okay, well, you have these massive targets, but you also have to do the networking events, you have to be mentoring junior staff, you have to be writing articles and other content for the firm, you have to be a good person that people like to talk. That there's all of these other things which we expect, but we don't actually measure or reward in the same way that we do if people are exceeding their billable units, notwithstanding whether those units are actually recovered or paid for by their clients. And a lot of the time they may not be. So I think that has shown an impact for me.
So we have 4 questions that we ask every guest, and they're designed to help our listeners shape their legal career no matter where they are. And I think here we're also talking to lawyers who are stuck in the billable model, right? Because not everybody has got control over whether they are at a firm that uses value-based pricing. So the first question is, what advice would you give a person who's starting off in legal services?
I think I would start by saying to just know yourself and know your value, to really understand what that is. Lawyers play an incredibly important role in our society, and that extends beyond work. I actually went to a seminar recently, a seminar on change management, and the speaker there, his name is Mal Cook, and what he said, I really thought, yeah, I really agree with that. Is that, he said that the business of law is so important because the rule of law is so important. And we just kind of look to our friends overseas at the moment and see how when the rule of law kind of starts coming apart, how much that impacts the whole society. And so I think how we approach business in law is really, really important, and how we approach people in those businesses to design how we do things is really important. So I would say to the young people joining the profession is that this profession is actually hungry for change. There's a lot of people at all generations who don't like doing things the way that they've always done it, even though that is where we are still staying. It's not actually where a lot of people in the profession want to be. And so I think that be comfortable to play to your strengths and to find the workplace that allows you to explore your strengths and to flourish, because they certainly are out there. And I would also just encourage people to start actually paying attention to their own experiences when they are engaging with other professionals or other services. And that's what we do. That's what Kathy, Zoe and I do. It's almost like a little game that we play whenever we go to the real estate agent or the financial planner or get a plumber around or whatever. We actually reflect on what our experience with that as a consumer engaging somebody for a service has been like. We reflect on that and we talk about it as a team, and then we think, wow, this was great how they did this, or like, wow, this is a really bad customer experience, and this is why. I would say start really paying attention to that, and then bring that back to your firm and start talking about how you can do things differently.
What's one thing about the legal profession you wish that you could change, or that you wish would change, and how do you think that change could happen?
Well, I guess that my sort of North Star is that I want upfront fixed pricing by any name, whether it's value pricing, aligned pricing, consensus pricing. It's named different things at different places. But that notion of a project management style approach being applied to legal matters and clients being given the certainty of scope and fixed prices, I want that to become the norm in the legal profession. And I do think that shift is slowly happening, and it's being driven by small law more substantially, because we've got people in small law that they're agile, they can change quickly. There's more tendency to have that hive mind where we can implement change at a faster pace. But I think for that to happen more broadly, I really do think that once the tech solution has been cracked, that there will be a flood of firms that do tick over. And I feel like we're on the edge, or we're looking towards that now. I have always thought that it is a bit of a chicken and egg scenario. It's like there is no on the market at the moment, to my knowledge, that all of the legal practice management systems are designed for firms that are operating under the billable hour model, and some of them can be a little bit more flexible than others in allowing for the value pricing model, but it's clunky and it's not the way that the tech is actually being designed, and you don't get the benefits of all of the other things. To my knowledge, there's not a practice management system that is designed for value pricing and also ticks all the other boxes in terms of trust account compliance and so on and so forth. And I'd say that the tech designers are thinking, well, there's not a big enough demand for that. But I think that people aren't making the change because the solution isn't there. So to me, it really is a bit of a chicken and egg scenario. But I do think that that will change hopefully very quickly, very soon.
So, what is the one myth about what it means to be successful in law that you would want to debunk?
I think that it's seen as being successful in law if you are a yes person. I think that there is a real yes culture that can create a lot of problems for the high achievers. So, of course, the industry is full of high achievers, people that are extremely capable, very intelligent, very driven. But often the flip side of that is that they're not good, and in some cases quite terrible, at recognizing their own limitations in being able to do everything. And so often that creates people overcommitting and putting themselves under an enormous amount of stress and pressure and reaching this state of burnout. So I think that there's a real power in saying no and setting boundaries, and it's only in actually saying no and setting those boundaries that people can find enjoyment and fulfillment and show up to do what they do well, and then switch off and be able to actually enjoy and be present in their personal lives. And I think, to me, success is being able to straddle that line really clearly and do it in a way that really serves you and your family and the people that you work with.
If you could design the ideal legal career path, what would it look like?
I think that it's the law firms that have the ability to be able to canvass the strengths and the interests of their people, and then work out the way how to measure and reward that and allow people to play to their strengths and flourish and foster a team environment, is what's going to provide the best career paths for people. And we hear about a T-shaped lawyer, of course, having the deep expertise in their area, but then also having their skills across, the top of the T. And that goes for other legal professionals in the support roles too. And so to me, the ideal legal career path is being able to actually allow people to forge their own path or work together as part of a broader unit with the skills that they can bring to the table. And the rise of AI is going to really help with that, because it creates the space for people to do the really important, fun, creative, valuable work by removing the bottom stuff that we tend to get really bogged down in. But to me, it really starts with design at the firm level to actually create an environment for success for different people, however those career paths might look.
You want to tell us a little bit more about Recalibrate and also where people can get hold of you?
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. I actually didn't mention this at the start, I don't think. So alongside Bromfield Family Law is the family law firm that I work in with Catherine and Zoe, and we were being asked a lot by other firms, okay, well, we've heard about value pricing, we understand the why, we do something that we're interested in, but how do we actually do it? And so that's how Recalibrate was born. It's our consultancy business that the three of us are co-directors of, and we help other law firms to find their how. And so we say to people that there is no blueprint for value pricing. There really is some overarching principles. There's, that it is a different business model, of course, to the billable hour, and it's got its own non-negotiables, I would say. The actual design is really open to the firm and how we're going to do it, which templates we're going to use, how our team is going to work. Really does touch every level of the operations. And so what we do is come in as boots on the ground, embed ourselves in the team with people as people who have had experience in value pricing, including Kathy and Zoe, who are practicing lawyers under the value pricing model, and help firms go through this massive change initiative to rewrite their business models, which is really exciting. People can find us on LinkedIn and our website, of course, which is recalibrate.legalops.com.au. We are, as you know, based in Australia, but we're without borders. We've, worked with firms in different countries, and there really is no limits on how you can apply this business model or something similar to your law firm as well.
So I've loved this, really have absolutely loved this. And I'm still going back into my mind, doesn't it, about you, Elizabeth. Frankly, I don't care. But I do, I do. But I keep going back into that thing about we think value pricing is somehow revolutionary in the legal profession, but to the consumer, to the buyer, B2B, B2C, whatever it is, it's just the norm. We're outside the norm and we're expecting everyone to fit into this way of working that they actually don't understand. And if we moved into value pricing, we would just be actually helping clients to understand more about how it was that we work and what we're doing. And we keep saying that we're client focused, that we're client centric, but we're not, because that fundamental thing that helps them make a decision, we don't give them that clarity. So I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Elizabeth. Otherwise, we'll say goodbyes.
No, you've said it all.
I always do, don't I?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay, so a big thank you, Eleni, for coming on to the show and just sharing your wisdom. We've been your hosts, Scott Simmons and Elizabeth Stadler, and this has been Legal Off the Leash.